joining us. This is Joy Garcia and my father-in-law and friend Zen Garcia.
Hello, everyone.
And we're here today for another episode of Book Reviews with Zen. And actually today we're going to do a little different of an episode. Last night we actually didn't ask me anything, and someone asked a very good question. They said, what book, if you could choose one book out of the Sacred Word Publishing collection, would you take with you if all technology, all electronics, everything, internet, everything shut down? And I asked this question to Zen, and I wanted to record his response. So Zen, what book would you take with you?
Well, initially I had considered what topics people were interested in. But ultimately, after having thought about it in consideration, I think that the End Time Apocalypses, the Great Commission 3, which is this book here, is the book that I would want to have because it contains within it all of the extra biblical, extra canonical books, as well as the authorized, some of the Apocrypha, that are specific to the fig tree generation and to the end of days, the last times, and where I believe we are in the timeline. And that Enoch referred to us as a distant and remote generation, that he knew even in his day that he would be writing for us, and that many of the other apostles, patriarchs, and prophets also, because within Scripture about 1/3 of it is prophetic and specific to the last generation. That even what the apostles asked of Christ in explaining to them and detailing and sharing in description what would be the signs of his return and of the end of the age. And in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, which are those particular chapters that are specific to this question, he described that there will be wars and rumors of wars, empires, nations rising up against each other. There would be earthquakes in diverse places, the waves and the sea roaring, and he then spoke about how false prophets would arise and that they would persecute the believers. And then he went into specifically that as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the second coming of the Son of Man, equating to what happened with the giants and the fallen angels and their interdiction into the affairs of humanity. But specifically, he said that, know ye the parable of the fig tree, and that those who saw the blooming of the fig tree, that this would be the generation which would witness his return and the fulfillment of all prophecy. And so this particular book that we put together has all of the apocalyptic narratives which are specific to the fig tree generation. And in my belief, if you study the end of days and the last times as is revealed within Scripture, that a lot of what we compiled in this particular book you can't find anywhere else. And that studying, investigating, researching this material, you will come to understand the end of days and the timeline of its unfolding in a manner that you otherwise may not be able to do. That specifically in the Bible we have the book of Revelation, which tells us about the end times and about what would happen in parable form. But in this particular book we have so much, like the Revelation of St. John the Theologian, that is a companion book to that particular text, but it explains in great detail, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, what's going to happen, and you don't have to try to decipher. It's an explanation of what will occur. And the contents of this book include the apocalypse of Abraham, the apocalypse of Moses, the 14th vision of Daniel, the apocalypse of Elijah, the Hebrew apocalypse of Elijah, the 4th book of Ezra, the apocalypse of Shadrach, the sibling oracles, the second book, the Apocalypse of Zephaniah, the Apocalypse of Baruch, the Apocalypse of Thomas, the Apocalypse of Peter, the first and second Apocalypse of James, the Apocalypse of Paul, the Revelation of St. John the Theologian, the 10 signs of the end of the age, the Apocalypse of Samuel, the Apocalypse of Zerubbabel, and the vision of Adaman. And so, as I said, all these are specific to the end times. And so if everything were to shut down and you were no longer able to gain access to the internet to study some of these texts, you would have all in one place everything that would be going down around you. And so I do recommend this particular text for that purpose.
I think that's a very logical choice, but I was wondering, how did you, I know that you compiled all of these different texts that you had come across in your studies, and how did you find these texts, and how did you decide what to put together and compile together and things like that to make the Great Commission 3?
Well, the Apocalypse, as a word, speaks to the revealing, and it is, again, connected to, in my opinion, what Joel and the book of Acts speak about as the Spirit of God being poured out on all flesh at the end of days, and that those things which have been hidden would be brought to light. And I do believe that with the blooming of the fig tree, that was an indicator for both us and also the fallen angels. And you see that the agenda of the New World Order has been accelerated since that time, and that it will include, in my opinion, the coming reign of the Antichrist as an extraterrestrial alien god, and that the strong delusion of that the extraterrestrials, the aliens, which we know to be the fallen angels, that they created us, and that God is an alien, that this is part of the strong delusion. And so it's also reason why I believe that biblical cosmology has come to the forefront in recent research and studies as far as the past few years. And so as far as I have always been interested in personally studying myself the extra biblical materials to come to better understanding on such ambiguous chapters and verses as Genesis 6, the sons of God mating with the daughters of man and creating a race of giants, that there were giants on the earth before and after the flood. And when you really consider and ask yourself what the Bible is talking about with those particular verses, there's little information included within the canonical materials to explain that particular occurrence, and historically what happened that led to the creation of a race of giants. And so studying texts like the Book of Enoch, we gain great clarity as to exactly what happened and how they brought down the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven to teach humanity things like metallurgy and how to create weapons, and then in that manner, through controlled opposition, created wars of destruction and the slaughter of innocents, and things like abortion, also the root cutting, using astrology and signs and things that pagan religions are based upon, and that Satan and Legion utilize to lead astray and also to enslave the pre-Adamites and even modern humanity now. That these things have to be studied and examined in order to gain greater clarity on what the Bible is talking about. And we see in Jude and also 2 Peter that it speaks about those that left their first estate, that went after whoring after strange flesh. And so chapters like chapter 100 of the Kebra Nagast, which we compiled a book called The Collected Works of Enoch to specifically bring to light this deeper revelation. But when you read those particular chapters and those texts, you gain greater clarity on what is alluded to within the canonical materials. And the last chapter of the Bible, Revelation, is specific to the end times. But there are other, like 4th Ezra, part of the Apocrypha, originally included with the original translation and published release of the King James Version of the Bible, the 80 texts which made up that particular text. Having been removed, re-examining that information, we see that it speaks about the Messianic age. And even the book of Enoch reveals and talks about the elect one and the Son of Man, which is reference to Christ. Even Daniel spoke about Christ as the Son of Man and his coming. And there's even laid out a timeline as to when he would be born. And we see in Isaiah that prophetically it reveals many occurrences and events that would be related to his life, his incarnation, his death, and even his resurrection. And so, again, studying these extra biblical materials, you gain greater clarity on what is the fullness of the timeline of the biblical narrative. And so I think that's important to do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zen, for that. And I really hope that that helps answer your question on what book would you take if all technology, internet, everything went down. The answer is officially Great Commission 3, and we hope that it's a blessing to you, and we'll be praying for you and all of your seekings. We just will be praying that you are blessed in all of your seekings and everything. So we thank you so much for watching, and we'll definitely see you next time. Shalom and blessings.
Shalom. God bless all.
Bye.
Good night.
Sacred Word Revealed comes to Atlanta, Georgia on March 27th to 29th, 2020. Purposed to reveal end-time mysteries, to prepare the final generation. We must don the full armor of God. Featuring Zen Garcia, Gary Wayne, Stephen and Yana Benoon, Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, Justin James Garcia, Dr. Joy Pugh, Buy your tickets now at sacredwordrevealed.com.